So, sticking to format, I'll share a few words. The words that I'm going to share are not meant to provide any definitive, absolute answer, but more create a anchor point around which we can reflect. And so to stimulate and inspire reflection in regard to our relationship to the practice, our relationship to what we're experiencing, our relationship to our own thinking around the topic and in general. And we've just finished 30 minutes of meditation practice. And when we sit down to meditate, the experience can be one that we're looking forward to, but it can also be one that we're not necessarily wanting to engage in. And I suppose this depends on what's going on for us before we pull out our meditation cushion and sit down. Sometimes the goings on of life can be so enthralling, so invigorating, so enjoyable that to create the space for introspection and formal meditation practice isn't so appealing. But the opposite is also true. That there are times when what's going on in our day-to-day affairs are so hectic, maybe uncomfortable, challenging, strenuous, stressful, that all we want to do is to be able to sit down and meditate. So, how we are experiencing life when we arrive at our meditation cut can have an influence over how we are, our attitude towards the practice. When we sit to meditate, as it's taught within the Yoga Sutra of Patanjali, we are endeavoring to experience a state of effortless concentration. Steady, ongoing concentration which is flowing without any effort, without any work on our part. It's continuous and steady. Now, we'll know from our own practice that this isn't always the case. We sit down on our meditation cushion, and the last thing we're experiencing is a state of effortless concentration. And even to experience concentration with effort, with determined engagement, using specific techniques, that can be a challenge. And so our idea of meditation is informed by what we've studied, what we've learned, what we have been taught, which has its origins in ancient scriptures and ancient teachings. But we have to look at what this means for us in terms of our own private practice in the 21st century. Meditation nowadays has a lot of hype and is often spoken about in tandem with mindfulness. Mindfulness, meditation, well-being, wellness, key words within the domain of mental health and well-being. And so meditation has become a way for people to relax. But if we're listening to the teaching, the goal of meditation isn't for us to relax. Indeed, relaxation is just a precursor to facilitate our being able to practice concentration so that we may then experience a state of effortless concentration and know what it means to be meditating. When we've become successful in our capacity to remain anchored in a state, in a meditative state, when we are able to enter into a meditative state without difficulty, then the idea of being relaxed is no longer as relevant. The idea of relaxing is important for those who are attending the practice of meditation, and they're beginning or approaching it from a state of restlessness and distraction. The opposite of restlessness is to be relaxed. And this restlessness will express in different ways in the physical body, in constant movement and agitation and coming and going and toing and froing, and as physical expressions where there's actual movement. And so in order to be able to sit still, the practitioner has to cultivate a capacity to relax. But this goes to a deeper level in terms of all the energetic impulses which are shooting around the body, and the relationship that the practitioner has to these may cause them to experience restlessness. And the same is true in terms of what's going on in the mind. And so restlessness is a consequence which can prevent a practitioner from being able to approach meditation, to enter into that space, that state of meditation. And so relaxation is fundamental. And relaxation basically means to neutralize the restlessness which is causing distraction, and vice versa, distraction which is facilitating restlessness. And so we've said that when we approach our meditation cushion, we may do so with an attitude of enthusiasm or with an attitude of, well, less reluctancy, we could say. And we know that when we sit to practice, engage in our formal practice, we are endeavoring to cultivate effortless concentration. And there's a process which we follow to help us to do that. And relaxation, getting settled into the process, is important. And as we move through the process, we do experience deeper states of relaxation. But the goal is not relaxation in and of itself. And so now in the 21st century, with the explosion in the mental health industry, there can be a tendency to align meditation with relaxation, being that meditation ultimately is to allow us to relax. But the teachings, they say a lot more. Meditation is an experience of reality where our concentration is effortless. Now, this effortless concentration can be paralleled to a state of mindfulness, but this is another word from another tradition, and jargon can sometimes overlap but may confuse as well. So if we stick to the idea of effortless concentration, meditation, that's a state where they're able to have what's taking place around us impress upon our mental faculty in a manner where it's not distorted. And I was thinking about this earlier. In the old cameras, the film, you put the film into the camera, and depending on the lighting, you could have faster shutter speed or a slower shutter speed. The aperture, the lens of the camera could be open, or more closed. So depending on the amount of light available, the shutter speed could be faster and the aperture could be smaller. This happens with our eyes as well, where the pupil, when there's a great amount of light, becomes smaller, contracts. And what happens on a camera when this aperture is smaller, it means that there's not such a saturation of light, that the light is filtered in a very minuscule way. And in that way, it allows for a more concise definition of line, of color, of contrast. And so the image that's impressed upon the film within the camera is more detailed. If, by contrast, you're taking a picture at night and you need to use a slow shutter speed and the aperture needs to be open more, then there's a greater saturation of light. There's greater exposure. But that exposure creates a capacity for more information to be passed to the film quicker, and so it doesn't have the same accuracy. And even if we take it back to our eyes, at nighttime, we just can't see the same level of detail because the pupil is opened up. There's a greater saturation of light and there's less capacity to define the different shapes, lines, elements. Why did I get talking about that? In our meditation practice, the state of effortless concentration is a state where, like the film in the camera, our mental state is able to not be overwhelmed, not be saturated, but instead to pick up on the detail, to perceive, to be perceptive. The light is brighter. And like the camera, when the light is brighter, there's a capacity to pick up on the subtleties, the detail. And so our whole practice, informal, formal, but as we're talking now, our formal meditation practice is a practice which is facilitating our being able to experience effortless concentration so that we become habituated in abiding in that state of effortless concentration. Meaning that as we're engaging with the world and with life, that light is bright. The concentration is not being interrupted. And indeed, we're not having to be extra careful so our concentration is sharp. We are just concentrated. Concentration is happening. It's not being exercised. It's just happening. The state, the mental state, is one which is poised, alert, and attentive, and it's not being interrupted. There's nothing causing a distraction. And so whatever may take place in the environment around, be it a conversation or some visual, some goings on of any kind, we're perceptive because there's nothing at all which is taking our attention away from it. So when we talk about our relationship to meditation practice, we're not meditating to relax. If you're meditating to relax, from my own approach to teaching this topic, I prefer to call it relaxation, which is perfectly okay. To engage in 20 or 30-minute practice so as to facilitate what's been called in the past a relaxation response is perfectly okay. But to respect the teaching as they're being offered and as they have been offered and as I have received them, meditation is more than just relaxation. But to experience meditation, we need to facilitate our overcoming restlessness, which means that we will experience relaxation. And then, bearing all this in mind, we talked about the attitude we might have when we approach our meditation cushion or when we're getting up in the morning. We may be looking forward to our meditation practice. We may be reluctant to engage. Or in the evening, we may be looking forward to it, enthusiastic, or we may be reluctant. And speaking more on the attitude of looking forward to it, what is it that's motivating us to meditate? On a more macro level, in the greater scheme of things, we can put forward our argument that we want to engage meditation because we want to be able to explore the nature of the mind so that we can facilitate its neutralization, so that we can experience effortless concentration, and in that way be attuned to the passing currents of life, engaged with them, knowing our essential nature as we move through life. And that's our macro understanding of why we're engaging in meditation practice. And so with that, then we'll set a routine in place where we might meditate in the morning and the evening. But meditation can sometimes become a go-to for not having to deal with circumstances, not having to ride the wave as it's breaking. And sometimes this will mean that we will use the argument that we need to meditate, that meditation is important to us, that what's going on in regards to our day-to-day affairs, be it with actions that we need to engage in, things we need to get done, conversations that we need to have, attention that we need to give, we will justify to ourselves and perhaps to others that that has to wait. Meditation's more important. And this can become tricky for us because meditation is important. We've given our argument, our reasoning for why we want to engage in meditation on a macro level, from a long-term point of view. And then we've broken that down into how we'll fit it into our daily routine, so as to meet that end objective. But how this might play out in a way where it's not going to be of benefit, where it might actually disturb and interfere with the overall objective is, for example, when we are responsible for certain duties, certain affairs, things that we're supposed to get done, and we prioritize our meditation over those duties. And other people are depending on us. Or perhaps it's going to affect our life circumstances in a way which is not holistically useful. Yet we decide to engage in the meditation practice. And how this might pan out in a more, let's say, graphic example would be that maybe we have the idea of waking up early in the morning and we're going to meditate and then do whatever we need to do and then go out for work. Maybe with the idea that we're going to come back in the evening and then meditate before we go to bed at some point. And then what actually happens is that we go to bed late. We don't wake up in time in the morning, but we say we're going to meditate anyway. And then we don't have time to prepare or work in the way we need to prepare. We're in a rush. Then we get to work. Then we don't have the things done that we need to have done. Maybe have packed a lunch or whatever it might be. We get through the day. Then when we get home, we're running around because of a consequence of our previous actions. Then we have dinner late. Stomach's full, not feeling like meditating. So maybe we stay up a bit longer. And we're going to bed a bit late, but we decide to stay up a bit later to meditate. But we don't meditate very well because now we're tired. That's one example. And all the consequences are coming back on us. But another example might be that we're living our lives and it might be a family holiday and people are organizing things that they're going to do. And maybe you've decided you'd like to meditate extra, which in and of itself is not an issue. But maybe meditation is your way to not have to engage, or in fact, a way to abscond, to escape. If I think of another example, which might highlight it even more clearly, is if you're, I heard somebody saying before that they needed to meditate because if they didn't, they'd lose the plot. And so maybe a daily meditation practice built into their daily routine is very useful. But at the first sign of a challenge or a difficulty, maybe a conversation that didn't go the right way, or maybe the fact that you've been more socially involved than usual, and maybe it's just been a little bit unusual or taxing, that we need to just retreat to our meditation cushion. We have to be careful of that. We have to be careful not to negate life for the sake of not meditating, but for the sake of being able to relax. Because often what happens is we'll have engaged in a dinner party or we'd have some guests over and all the dishes are piled up and everything needs to be cleaned. And maybe our partner, whoever's with us, our housemates, our family members, we just say to them, listen, I'd like to meditate for a while. I'll do this after. But of course, when you come back, they've done it all. And while you're away, what did you actually do? Did you meditate or did you just relax? Did you meditate and establish a state of effortless concentration, or did you use the time just to disconnect. So we have to be careful that we're not using the idea of formal meditation practice as a way to escape, to just find disconnection. And if we're unsure, a good way to measure it is when we do take those additional moments, those extra meditation practices. When we're doing those, are we actually working through the process and establishing a state of effortless concentration? Or are we just enjoying a state of relaxation? Reality, and the reality we experience in our meditation practice, is one which offers a great many layers of depth. Meditation practice and entering into a state of effortless concentration. When we're engaged in life, it allows us to be alert and attentive, receptive. And then with those capacities, we're able to manage situations in an emotionally mature way. In our meditation practice, formal, that alert attentiveness allows us to explore the subtleties of reality, to go deeper into those. But both informal practice, where we're endeavoring to maintain a state of effortless concentration, even as we're engaging in life, meaning that we're not fixing our conditioning and our preferences onto everything, but instead remaining open to the experience. And then with that, navigating the experience afresh in every single moment. That in our informal practice, and then in our formal practice, where we use our effortless concentration to remain open to the experience of the deepest subtleties. And the most subtle of subtle being infinite space, the infinite. And just to experience that without interruption. We can see how each of these, both the informal state of effortless concentration and the formal state of effortless concentration, are quite different to just disconnecting, to relaxing, finding time out. And in fact, the practice of engaging in life and maintaining a state of effortless concentration, even though the circumstances, the wave that we're riding, is a challenging one. That practice, when adhered to, when given to, can reap greater rewards. So I'm reminded, and as a way of finishing up, of a question that Paramahansayogananda put to Reverend Royeugenedavis when Roy went to SRF at the age of 18. He showed up after having traveled all the way from his hometown in Ohio. And when he arrived and he met with Paramahansayogananda outside Mount Washington building headquarters, Paramahansayogananda asked Roy, "You know, this isn't the path of an escapism, don't you?" And Roy said, "Yes." And this question has always resounded in my mind and in my own practice over the years I have, now looking back, I can see how I was able to rationalize and distort my argument, my mental argument, so that it felt like what I was doing was being a disciplined, responsible yogi. But what I was actually doing was avoiding engaging in life. So unless you decide to actually do that, become a monastic, move off to the mountains, which is not necessary, then celebrate life, engage in life. Life itself is a practice. And what we do in our formal practice provides us with the capacities to be able to engage in life informally in a manner which is free and attuned and fulfilling. And now I'm reminded of Ron Linden, who in a talk, Ron Linden was a senior minister at Center for Spiritual Awareness, and he worked there for many decades, side by side with Roy. And Ron Linden, in a talk, he used the example of a jazz musician. They practice their scales. They practice their scales all the time, all the different types of scales, minor harmonic, minor, major, all the different types of scales. They go through them all religiously with great commitment. Sometimes to be in the mood, sometimes they're not in the mood. And the reference he gave, I think, was Charlie Parker, where he said he would practice the scales all the time. But then when he went up on stage to perform, he didn't play any scales. He just played. So in a similar way, our formal practice of entering into the state of effortless concentration facilitates our being able to engage in life with the same capacity, where we are able to live each moment fresh, where our concentration is effortless and it's not being interrupted, diffused by our preconditioning. So these are just some words for reflection.